Notre Dame fans, welcome to a special edition of our Irish Breakdown podcast. My name is Brian Driscoll. I'm the publisher. We are going to be going to the live commitment of Christian Gray right now, who's choosing Notre Dame or LSU or Ohio State or USC. So let's go there now.
About it, and it was very stressful, but I got through it, and it was just slight work because I had God on my side, and He gave me all the things that I needed.
I love talking to kids about some of your campus visits because I know they can be a lot of fun, getting to see a lot of behind the scenes looks, maybe getting to talk to some coaches that you were only able to watch on TV for a long time. What were some of your top visits?
My top visits, it would be Notre Dame, LSU, Ohio State, and USC. They was pretty great visits. I got to see who the real teams are, and I got to see the real places. So yeah.
When you're going to these visits and you're talking to these coaches and different things like that, what were you looking for in your next school?
First, I was looking for how is their faith with God and the academics, and how are they with the team, like family atmosphere and the love there.
You can tell that you're very family oriented. Obviously, a lot of this, like you said, has to do with your relationship with God. So what do you want people to know about you as a player, though, on the field?
As a player on the field, I let my talent speak for itself, and I just don't talk at all. If they trash talk to me, I just don't reply back. I just play, and I just keep God first. So
I think mom and sister, is he this nice all the time? Is he this good of a kid every single day?
He is a good kid. He's a good kid all the time.
Yeah. All the time. All right, Christian, hang on just a second. We're going to talk a lot more football coming up. Next time we talk to you, we are going to get your decision here. As I mentioned, Christian had a ton.
And we go to our commercial break here with CBS Sports, and we are going to talk a little bit about kind of where this recruitment is kind of going into his decision. You see the four hats on the table for Christian Gray. These are the four schools he's announced for a while. There's four finalists. And you look at Notre Dame, you look at LSU, Ohio State, and USC. Really, this has been kind of a deal where it's been more about, for some time, this has really been more of a Notre Dame LSU battle most recently, but there was a time where it was even more so Notre Dame trailing Ohio State and LSU. So this has been an interesting recruitment. We'll kind of dive into more of it once he makes his decision, but really Notre Dame, LSU are perceived as the top two schools heading into this decision. And as he said, you listen to him, the different things he's looking for. This is a very smart, intelligent young man. He's kind of been looking for some different things, but also the football part's important. And Christian is a kid that I think football-wise really absolutely was a must-get and was a huge need for Notre Dame. And cornerback, obviously, coming into this class is a big need for Notre Dame. They needed to land more impact than they did numbers, but this is one of those kids who could be that. Obviously, we'll see what his ultimate decision is. He's been a kid that's been on the board for Notre Dame for quite some time. He earned his offer in June of 2021. Had a very good camp performance for Notre Dame last summer. He's been on campus 7 times since last year. His two most frequent visitors are Notre Dame. He's been 7 times, according to On3, and then he's been to Ohio State 5 times. So clearly those schools have been high on his board for quite some time. And of course, LSU got on late. See, LSU's recruitment's been interesting because they weren't really a huge player for him early. He liked LSU, but it was really Notre Dame, and then Ohio State was there. And then Brian Kelly hired Robert Steeples, who is the cornerbacks coach for LSU, who was the former head football coach at DeSmet Jesuit, which is where Christian Gray is from. And once that move was made, LSU became a major player in Christian Gray's recruitment. Obviously, there's a very strong connection there. He had been gone for a couple of seasons. He was with, I believe, the Minnesota Vikings most recently. when he left to Smet, and then obviously Brian Kelly hired him at LSU. And Coach Peoples is someone who we got a chance to meet at Irish Breakdown a couple years ago. He was one of the finalists for the cornerback's job when Todd Light stopped coaching, and Mike Mickens was ultimately the guy that was hired for that job. But Robert Steeples was one of the finalists for that job and was someone who interviewed for that job, and really passionate guy, very strong coach, brings a great track record. And obviously when it comes to Christian Gray, someone who Christian Gray and his family know, respect and trust. So that was a really important one for Notre Dame, or for LSU, for Brian Kelly to have a shot at this recruitment, was to make that kind of hire. Now, that's not why he hired Robert Steeples. It just was one of the benefits of it, was allowing LSU to kind of get into the mix and be a player for him. So LSU really became the strong contender. And there was a time when people were putting crystal balls in and making predictions for LSU, thinking that they were going to be the team to beat. Notre Dame, for a time, had actually fallen behind LSU and Ohio State in his recruitment. Then they've been able to charge back, and they're now right there with those other programs as he gets ready to make his decision. And as I said, we'll give some backstory. Looks like they're coming back from commercial now. So as soon as he starts talking, we will go to live to that, and Christian will be allowed to make his decision and make his announcement, again, between Notre Dame, LSU, Ohio State, and USC, or Southern Cal. So we will go to that here very, very shortly. They're kind of showing some highlights. They are back from commercial, but they're going to be going to him very, very soon for this decision. So here we go. Looks like they are back
at their church. All right, Christian, the floor is yours. Let's hear your decision.
All right. First, I want to say thank you to God for everything. All glory to him. And I'll always keep him first. And second, I want to say thank you to my family and for everyone else who has contributed in my life. And I want to say third of all, just thank you to all the coaches who recruited me and everything. It was just a blessing. So, and now I'll be taking my talents for the next 4 years to the University of Notre Dame.
And you can hear all the support for one Christian Gray there, everybody behind him. Congratulations on your decision. Look, he's already shutting him down. He's going to take charge now. Why did you pick the Fighting Irish over everyone else?
Well, I talked to God about it, and it aligned with my faith. It aligned with everything I have for the future for myself. And I just thought coach staff is great. The environment was great. And it just shows me what I can be besides a football player too. So
Marcus Freeman has had a huge impact on that program before the season has even begun. What was your visit like with him, and what did he tell you about what he wants to see in you over the next 4 years?
He said he will help me become a better version of myself, a better person, and be a better to the team everywhere else in my talents, and he'll help me out. And he just told me I was gonna be great. So
you are already great. Look, Notre Dame is killing it in recruiting right now, in particular with your class. A bunch of great guys that are headed there in the class of 2023. What is Notre Dame doing right now?
Oh, excuse me. What'd you say?
I said, what is Notre Dame doing so well right now, where it's putting together such a great recruiting class, including yourself?
Man, hey, I don't know. That's God's work right there. They doing great things though. They're doing a lot of great things. So.
All right, tell Irish fans who are watching this right now, celebrating, what they can expect from you as a player when you get there.
Hey man, I'm gonna show all my love to y'all. I'm just gonna be great. I'm gonna just give it out and just go hard in every game, go hard in the weight room every day. So that's what y'all was gonna expect from me. I'm gonna be that great kid. So yeah.
Christian, congratulations. Enjoy the rest of the day there. I know you said this was a very special day with your grandfather. So I hope everybody in your family gets to celebrate today and has a great rest of 4th of July.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There it is. IB Nation, Christian Gray has committed to Notre Dame. Just a Sean, I think people kind of got a glimpse of what you've been talking about. Sean Davis, IB Nation, Irish Breakdown recruiting analyst joining us. You've been kind of all over this one, Sean, from early on when Notre Dame was the leader to when they fell behind, all those other type of things. We'll get into that here in a second, but Notre Dame fans just kind of got their first real glimpse of Christian Gray as a young man. I was told by a source very early on when Notre Dame was trailing, they said, I said, so who's the biggest contender? And they're like, so and so and so, but he's going to end up with us. And I said, well, why is that? And they're like, he's a Notre Dame kid. He just doesn't know it yet. And you kind of hear it there, Sean. This is the kid that fits in so incredibly well with Notre Dame, and fans just got a chance to see what kind of young man he is beyond the football field. This is a really unique young man.
And that's why today is such a special day. You heard the mention of his grandfather and situation with his mom and his family and the makeup and how they've gotten to this point. While certain mentors have been so important in his life, and you listen to him and you listen to his story, and he gives you his testimony, and you find out that at the heart of a recruiting battle, it really came down to, if I can put it simply, whatever he got up off his knees with and heard from God.
Right.
Like when a kid tells you that, you honestly believe it. And the fans might not like the fact that, a kid deciding between LSU, USC, Ohio State coming down to a prayer, because you don't know. You can't control what's going to be said or what that individual might hear. But ultimately, I think, as you said, your source, what they said, well, my conversations and how I felt, things were going to go lined up with that. And, I guess the prayer was just confirmation or affirmation, to what, we felt and what that source of yours felt. Just knowing the young man, knowing the family. And it's a fantastic day. This weekend, you know who I feel the most better for, because I feel like they've unfairly taken a lot from the fan base. This is a huge weekend, and a big shout out to the hard work of Mike Mickens over the last 2 years. That's finally getting the recognition that it deserves. Flat out. He has put in the work. He's putting even greater work in that we're going to end up seeing the fruit of in the 24 class. And a lot of fans say Mike Mickens needs to do this. He needs to do a better job. Well, here you go. Here is Micah Bell and Christian Gray in a span of 2 days. Like, what else can you want what else do you want from your defensive back coach at Notre Dame? So kudos to this entire staff. Brian, we knew this avalanche was coming over this weekend.
Let's dive into the backstory of this, Sean, because it's really fascinating. Sean texted me this morning, and we were chatting, and he goes, what was the most impressive recruitment that Notre Dame has had so far? And my answer surprised him, because I said Christian Gray. And the reason I said that is because Christian actually committed. So if you're on the message board, you are familiar with the little dancing gift that we have, right? So whenever we get good news, you're going to see me with a little Tupac and Carlton dance. Somebody asked me why I have those two. And I said, because Tupac is what I think I look like when I dance. Carlton is actually what I look like when I dance. So those are why I put those two together. And essentially what they mean is, hey, we're expecting some good news. Christian is actually the one that got it started. He was the first one. So 3 of the 6 are now public. So he actually committed to Notre Dame the weekend of his official visit. So that he was obviously, he had some other visits that he had scheduled. He ended up going to Ohio State, but he did give Notre Dame a silent commitment that weekend. He was the first kid on the board. So we've known that this was going to happen for the last couple weeks. However, really almost a month now. However, Sean, it wasn't easy to get to that point, right? So we've known since that weekend that this is, and then he actually committed on Friday, which is kind of, it was trending that way already, and it put it over the edge. So this is an interesting one, Sean, because when you and I first got on Christian, Notre Dame was considered the clear leader. He almost committed to Notre Dame back after his January visit, but he decided he wanted to wait, let things play out. In the time since then, LSU went out and hired, and I talked about this early at the beginning of the show, Sean. They hired Robert Steeples. And then at LSU. That was huge for this young man who, as you can tell when you listen to him, values relationships. He values people that he can trust. And then Ohio State got really involved, obviously, with their staff. Their new staff was able to get some momentum going with this young man. And Notre Dame kind of fell behind. And it was almost like they were not punished, but they fell behind partly because they had been there. And then there was this new excitement on these other two programs, right? So the new Ohio State staff really got on Christian. There was that excitement there where Notre Dame had been on him for a long time. Mike Mickens has been on him for a long time. But the reason that I felt like this was such a big recruitment and arguably the most impressive one is because there was no panic. There was no panic from Notre Dame. There was a time when it was looking like he was about to commit to LSU, right? He was on the verge of committing to LSU is kind of what our sources were telling. And you reach out to our sources and there was no panic at Notre Dame, none. It was like, look, stay the course because they knew what I said earlier, which is he's a Notre Dame kid. He just doesn't realize it yet. And he'll eventually realize it. And fortunately, Notre Dame was able to figure that out. But it's because of that relationship. And there was a comment in the commit story that we just published on that Christian gave you when you talked to him before this decision. And this is what he said. He said, Coach Mickens is my dude. He said his message to me was always bigger than football, and that was important to me and my family. Yeah. Coach Mickens stayed level on this. No panic, no try to, oh, shoot, we're falling behind. Let's throw some stuff out there. Let's negatively recruit LSU. Let's negatively recruit. It was just stay the course. And it worked out because he was able to kind of weather the excitement of LSU and the excitement of Ohio State and to a degree USC, but they were always kind of fourth. They were always kind of on the fourth on that list, Sean. But in the end, he was able to get it done, and it shows what having a plan, sticking to that plan, but also why it's so important to build relationships, not just throw a bunch of recruiting, mantras and gimmicks and different things. He stayed true to the plan, which for Christian Gray was establish a connection, show him what you can do for him as a young man, because that's going to be very important for Christian beyond all the excitement of the football aspect. And that's ultimately why Notre Dame and LSU were the final two schools, because those were the two schools where he had the best relationship because of Coach Steeples and because of Coach Mickens. And it says a lot about Notre Dame's whole operation, and especially Marcus Freeman and Mike Mickens, that they were able to beat out a guy who had known Christian for years and had coached him and had the family's trust in that regards. I think that is why, for me, Sean, this is the most impressive pickup for Notre Dame in regards to the work they had to put in to get here. I think Sean is frozen. So that is where this commitment went. So we'll get Sean. Either he's learned not to blink, or Sean is frozen at the current time. So we'll get him in here when we'll get him fixed here at some point in time here very soon. But I think that's kind of, as we dive into the backstory, to me, that is why this was such a big commitment for Notre Dame, is because they had to put in a lot of work in order to get here, in order to get Christian Gray in the class. And so, to me, this is why this staff is so impressive. And I asked Sean earlier as well. I said, hey, do you think this happens if the previous group was in charge? And the answer was no, because it really required, Mike Mickens did a ton of work to make this happen, but it was also a lot about the whole staff putting in work, the whole staff building that relationship. But at the end of the day, Mike Mickens, to me, played a huge, huge role in making this happen. So, this was a big, big pickup for Notre Dame in regards to getting him. So let's talk about sort of the impact that this has on Notre Dame's class. So what we kind of do is we'll talk the backstory, which you just shared. We'll do a class impact next. What does this mean for Notre Dame's class? And then we'll go watch some film. We'll do a film breakdown of Christian Gray, and we'll kind of dive into some of the things that make him such a highly ranked player and lead to why this is such an important pickup for Notre Dame. And so we'll get into that as well. And then, of course, we'll talk a little bit about what's next. But honestly, I mean, Notre Dame is done in the 23 class as of right now at cornerback. They are, I think they're ready to go. I think this is their one of focus. There was some talk of taking a third corner, but I think at this point in time, Notre Dame likes the two that they have. Obviously, they got Micah Bell on Friday, but you get Christian Gray to go after that. I think Notre Dame's very comfortable, and I think they'd like to use that extra scholarship at another position is where they are. So let's talk about the impact of this class. And I think Sean brought it up earlier, and we'll get him back in here in a few once he gets some things figured out technically. But you know, the thing that we've been puzzled by as we've discussed things, and this has been a thought, sort of a discussion on our message board, is I've been a little puzzled at some of the criticism that Mike Mickens has taken as a recruiter the last couple of years. When you look at his first class with Ryan Barnes and Philip Riley, Chance Tucker, JoJo Johnson, especially the first three who were there, and then you look at last year, he did that all while not being able to get on the road and recruit. Remember, that was put together during the COVID year. He got hired in, I believe, like February, and a month later, recruiting is over, and they can't travel, they can't go anywhere, they can't, bring kids on campus. The whole thing got shut down because of COVID, and he was still able to go out and beat Clemson for a Ryan Barnes, who had offers from Florida, LSU, Clemson, Georgia, I think LSU. Beat him for Philip Riley, who was originally committed to USC or to Notre Dame, flipped to USC, and they were able to flip him back again by staying the course. And so then you go in last year, and he beats Alabama and Washington for Benjamin Morrison. He goes out west and it gets Jaden Mickey, who has been one of the most impressive freshmen on campus so far, just really solidified the cornerback depth chart. So then you go into 2023, and you look at 2023 and you say, okay, well, what's the needs in the 2023 class? Well, the needs in the 2023 class were all about impact. So because you have three corners on the roster from and we talked about this when we broke down Micah Bell on Friday, when you look at the needs in the class, it wasn't a numbers thing. You signed three corners in the 2021 class. You signed two last year. All five of those kids enter the 2022 season with 4 seasons of eligibility remaining. So, it wasn't a numbers thing. The need in this class was impact talent. And Notre Dame is getting impact talent. So for those who like to look at recruiting rankings, Christian Gray is ranked as the number 51 overall player in the country, according to Rivals. And Micah Bell is ranked as the number 55 player in the country, according to 247 Sports. The last time that Notre Dame signed 2 corners in the same class that were ranked in the top 100, you have to go all the way back to 2006 with Darren Walls and Rayshawn McNeil. That's the last time. I thought it was going to be 2012 in the Kavari Russell and T. Shepard class, but nobody had Kavari Russell ranked in the top 100, which they should have. But all the way back to 2006 to the last time that Notre Dame was able to get 2 corners that were ranked in the top 100. So think about that win for Notre Dame is to get 2 like that. So when you talk about the need, Sean, mission accomplished. They needed impact players that could be dynamic potential. Micah Bell certainly brings that, and Christian Gray brings that as well. So it makes this a huge, just big-time home run for Notre Dame when it comes to cornerback recruiting.
That is a fantastic – you just took me back. I remember the day we got Darren Walls, and I was like, yes, we finally have that guy. And so let me – look, we go back to Christian Gray. He jumps on the scene when he runs the 4.41 at Ohio State, right? Has the same buzz. The next thing you know, he starts moving up. But like you said, he's really leaning towards Notre Dame. Things happen, change coach. He takes a step back. He's advised by his former high school coach and his mentor, Robert Peoples, not to rush into things. And in doing so, there were other programs that came in and made viable arguments to why they would be the perfect fit for him. That's the way recruiting should go, Brian. That's really what we're seeing is that Notre Dame can actually win these type of battles and still allow kids to go through the process.
Right.
Because we've been so used to feeling like, well, Notre Dame really needs to jump on these big-time kids and just get them to commit and then hold on. If you're going to become one of the top elite programs, that's not going to be the case for some of these elite guys down the stretch, whether it's going into, the fall season like an Mpemba, like Dante Moore, or anybody else that it seems like their recruitment is going to extend a little bit. Getting which goes back to what you said and why this recruitment is the most impressive. It was honest, it was transparent, and it was collaborative.
Mm-hmm.
Mike Mickens put in the work, but you just heard what he said about Marcus Freeman. And
Mm-hmm.
Marcus Freeman telling him, you're going to be great.
Right.
Everything that this young man and his family needed to feel and hear, honestly, they got it from the Notre Dame coaching staff and Mike Mickens in particular. So, once again, we talked about this morning. We're realizing and feeling the vibe, and it's nowhere near the peak that we think it could possibly reach in this program. So it's just a great time to be a part of this fan base. And I think the month of July has even more to give to Notre Dame football.
Sean, you talked about the sort of the angle that Marcus Freeman took with it. And it was, I mean, there was some football talk, but it was about, the holistic thing. It was very similar to what we heard from Charles Jagasaw, what we've heard from other players, where Marcus Freeman as the head coach has embraced a little bit of a different sort of role when it comes to how he recruits. That's different than what he did as the defensive coordinator. As a defensive coordinator, he had to lay out the plan for how I'm going to build you into a great player first.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And they didn't necessarily have that holistic thing. And so he kind of had to do that after the fact. Right. And so when you talk about the holistic aspect of this recruitment, right, when you talk about the fact that it was teamwork, it was not just Mike Mickens, it was not just Marcus Freeman, it was Chad Bowden, it was a lot of the different coaches, it was Chris O'Leary. They all played a role at different points in times, but they all played their role, and that's the key. Where Coach Mickens was able to build some trust, but then also the football part, and they were able to lay out kind of how they see it. And then Coach Freeman kind of comes in and says, hey, look, this is what we're going to do for you as a young man. And I think that is something that's been very effective, that we're hearing a lot of, that Coach Freeman's message first and foremost goes way beyond the football field. And because he is someone who I believe and find to be trustworthy, young people, parents find him to be trustworthy, I think that message really hits home. And that's kind of been the strategy for Notre Dame. It's strategy, but it's also true, is kind of him. That's been the role he's taken, is sort of that, let me be the head coach. And I got to say, we can talk about this. This probably maybe a good Saturday show is the fact that he has been someone who's been able to kind of take his, maybe give a little bit more responsibility to other people than I thought he was going to give early on. And it's paid off so far. And you're able to make this, get this pickup with Christian Gray and Micah Bell. Let's talk, Sean, about some film, right? I mean, that's kind of what we always do, right? So we will talk about the impact and all that. So we're going to talk about Christian Gray. We're going to watch some film, and then we're going to talk about how he fits. And we'll do some of that as we're watching film. But I think the one thing I'll say when I've kind of broken down Christian Gray is he is someone who did have to kind of grow on me a little bit. He's someone that when I first watched him, I liked him, but he's just so smooth. Sometimes I was wondering, does he really kind of have that speed? And, you see it sometimes here, but this is really, Sean, the first thing you notice when I popped on the film and all that stuff. The one thing I did notice right away is this kid is long. And he's listed between 6 foot, 6'1". Sean, I think you're muted as well. He's listed between 6 foot, 6'1". His high school roster has him at 6'2". I don't think he's 6'2". But look at his arms. He is a long kid, very, very long kid. That's the first thing that stood out to me when I watched the film of this young man.
Very athletic, has a lot of playing experience, extreme value on kick return and kick coverage. Now, you talk about not being pressed. The first clip that you played was against the fastest team in Illinois, and that's East St. Louis Flyers. And the fact that he outran them, some of their most athletic guys that end up going to SEC schools, shows you that he has surprising speed. We talk about this all the time, Brian, because we see 100 times, 200 times, and he's a track guy.
Right.
On a 4x1 and 4x2 relay for his team at this Met. Does it translate to the field? And I believe his speed and his times translate to the field. I think he's going to be a fantastic boundary corner. He's going to have the ability to use his length, his size, and his ability. And he's going to cause a lot of havoc for offenses because you're going to be able to put him out there and say, okay, take care of that side of the field.
Yeah.
Because he plays with so much confidence when the ball is in the air. And he doesn't give up too much behind him.
Right.
You're going to have to throw the ball in front of him, and he loves to come up and tackle.
So for me, the tackling part, we'll definitely get to that here in a second because he's got some hits. For me, I don't question the speed. I know the track speed is there and the kick return speed is there. What I was often wondered was, is the corner speed there?
Yeah.
And these two clips that he's going to show now, and there's some good game film. If you're someone who likes game film, there's some good game film on TV, on YouTube that you can find. But here's a perfect example. So like one of my questions was early on was, can he open up and run? And on this particular play, for example, he gets kind of beat off the line. He recovers relatively well, but I'm like, this guy's not necessarily a burner, although this is Christian Brothers, and that's a pretty good football player right there. But you watch this clip, he gets beat initially. You can see it here. Like his footwork is usually pretty good, but he gets beat here. His transition is a little bit slow. He gets beat off the line, but then he does recover pretty well. But he's so smooth. It doesn't look like he's trying that hard. And then this next play, so I'm thinking, okay, how's his transitions, right? Is he a little tight hipped? Tall corners tend to be a little tight hipped. Then you watch this very next clip, and his technique is right. And look how easily he transitions on this next play. And this is one of those things when I watched the film, I was like, okay, this is the stuff that when I say he kind of grew on me, it's stuff like this. Like, look, he's squeezing down, and then bam, he flips his hips, gets outside on that wide fade right now, and it's just all over that guy. And then he plants and sinks. And you start seeing more and more stuff like that on film. I think the other unique aspect too, Sean, you talk about him being a boundary guy. To be an effective boundary corner, you got to be able to play press man, and you got to be able to play off man. Yeah. And to me, he's one of the few corners that's really good at both. Now, again, my early question was, okay, does he have the speed to be that at the next level? Does it transition well? But as you see him more and more and more, and his off-season film at camps and stuff, you start seeing him, the speed's starting to show more and more and more. We've seen from him at 7-on-7s this last couple months. But he's got the foot quickness, the balance, the length, and all that to be really good to press man. He's got patient hands. He's not someone who gets himself kind of stuck in situations where he's lunging. He's got pretty good technique. He's been coached well. Shocker when you consider Robert Steeples was one of his early mentors. Yeah. Things along those lines, who I think is a good coach. But these are you see some of this stuff where he's playing off man, and that's where you see the kid really like, okay, this is when, if he's playing off man, you see some Julian Love to him. Yeah. Right. His football IQ, his instincts, ability to read routes, and his ability to see through the receiver to the quarterback is exceptional. This kid gets his hands on a lot of football, Sean. And I think that combination of being able to play press man while also effectively being a guy that can play off man is a big reason why I agree with you. I do think he can play field, but I really like that fit early on as a boundary guy, at least getting a chance to be that boundary guy because of that combination of ability to press, his length, his transition, his ability to press, and the fact that he's a really impact off-ball cover man as well.
And I spoke with his high school coach, and he also pointed out something. He said, just don't limit him to being a field guy. Mm-hmm. He can be a guy. He can be a chess piece for the defensive coordinator because you can allow him to follow. He can do that. And it goes back to what you said. He can play the field. You could possibly see him in the slot. If you choose to say, Christian, take this guy all game. He's your guy, which Notre Dame in the past really hasn't done. They've pretty much been a field boundary defense, but it just gives you that flexibility in certain situations to be able to have a kid with the flexibility and the talent that can allow a defensive coordinator to possibly scheme against someone or a particular player for that 1 week.
I think that as you look at this makeup, Sean, as we watch the film a little bit, that's an interesting point I kind of want to get to, is being able to kind of get away from field boundary. I'd like for them to be able to get away from field boundary, especially when you're talking about playing teams like Ohio State and Clemson and some of these teams that are going to push the tempo a lot more. Is that here here's another thing you talk about right there. He's a really skinny kid, like a really skinny kid. And Matt Bayless is going to have to become his best friend. But he's a very willing tackler, and he's got strength. Like, he's got really good natural strength, even though he's a very skinny kid. His hands are pretty strong. You want to see him go a little bit lower there, but I like the fact that this is a decent-sized running back, and as soon as he hits him, he stands that guy up. I mean, that guy doesn't run him over at all. They stalemate, and then he rides that guy out of bounds. So even though he's skinny, Sean, he's got some punch, which I really, really like. Look at this, and he is so all over this screen. Like,
yeah, when you see him in his 7-on-7, shorts with the tank, you see the shoulders on this kid.
yeah.
So you talk about, he's going to have to see Matt Bayless. Matt Bayless is going to see that frame.
Oh, yeah.
Big smile is going to come on his face because he knows, I can work with this.
Right, because he's listed between 185 and 190, but he's skinny, right? And it's kind of like what we've talked about with Josh Burnham. He's listed at 230, and then you're like, yeah, but he's kind of skinny. I really like that transition right there. Like, he's got really nice, clean feet. His footwork, he gets a little bit heavy-footed at times. That can be cleaned up pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But, this is another thing. When a kid's got that kind of length, you're showing press, then you bail. But his football IQ, Sean, is something I really, really like. Here's another good coming downhill. Look at that change of direction, though. Watch him plant and drive. That's really nice acceleration out of that break.
Really good. Yeah.
Really nice acceleration coming out of that break. So, but that's the other thing that you like about that off ball. It's one thing to be smart and instinctive, but can you then recognize it and have the speed to drive downhill and make plays on the ball? Yeah. And he has that. I mean, look, like we talk about, I loved Julian Love as a player, Sean. Loved Julian Love. I mean, he was, no pun intended, he was an excellent football player. Look at his physicality. Like I said, he's got strong hands. Very strong hands. Look at that. And a little grabby. I have to work on that. Very strong hands. But the thing about Julian Love was doing what he was doing at 5'10" and a half and running a 4.55. Right? This is a kid who's 6 foot plus with longer arms that's been timed as a 4.4 guy. So if that starts to show up more consistently in coverage, then this is a kid that has that kind of high level ability to be an impact player in what Notre Dame wants to do. And as long as Al Golden's a defensive coordinator, one thing that we've heard is they want to be really multiple with their coverages, even more so than what he was under Coach Freeman, who was a much more of a higher man guy.
Right.
So you need some guys that have some of that ability, especially in the boundary. And Christian Gray certainly brings that. There's a lot of similarities between him and Benjamin Morrison. But I also think that Christian is also a guy that with that range, with that instincts, with the tackling ability, can easily be a field guy.
Yeah.
And again, that's important because you're not pigeonholing him into one spot. You can say, hey, look, let's get our best guys in the field. And he brings some of that versatility to the table. So that to me is a big part of this, Sean, is you got to be able to land guys. It's no different than receiver, linebacker, anywhere else. You've got to be able to bring some versatility to the table. And this is a young man that has a lot. I like him personally in the boundary, but if you need a field corner and he's your second best corner or best corner, or maybe he's your best corner, but your second best corner is more of a boundary type of guy,
right?
Then he can easily go to field and you're not losing a thing. Ideally, with the way they've recruited the last couple of years with Jaden Mickey and Benjamin Morrison last year, and now Micah Bell and Christian Gray this year, which, again, for all the people that have questioned, Mike Mickens' recruiting ability, name me the last time Notre Dame has had a 2-year stretch of cornerback recruiting like that. It's been a long time. But there's a lot of these guys, Sean, aren't pigeonholed into one spot. And you're starting to see, okay, they do have potential to maybe eventually get away from this field boundary stuff. But here's another thing that it does, Sean, too. If Christian Gray turns out his potential, right, and he taps into his potential, and he's turns into an All-American type of corner like Julian Love, guys that bring versatility to their skill set, that means you can match up better. Yeah. Meaning, hey, this team's got a really good player, and we'd like to get into a matchup with him, but they move him around so much. Well, with him, you can say, hey, wherever he goes, you go, right? And you can't do that with a guy who's more of a pure boundary or a pure field guy, or a guy that's more of an outside guy. You need that versatility. You need that ability to say, hey, this guy can thrive at all those spots. And although there's some technical work that he'll need to do, the skill set is there, in my opinion, for Christian Gray to be that kind of player.
There is a symmetry between Christian Gray and a 24 prospect.
Mm-hmm.
very much the same corner if you watch that film. When you're watching Christian Gray, you understand why Notre Dame, and you got to see him in person at the Irish Invasion. You understand why Notre Dame loves Caleb Beasley. Same frame. Caleb Beasley is already listed at 200, if I'm not mistaken. Plays boundary the majority of the time, but at the same time, he has film in the slot. He has film in certain safety spots, but he is a cornerback that has 4.4 speed. I believe he ran a 4.4 at the Irish Invasion. So,
yeah, he ran in the 4.4 range. Ohio State's the one. He ran a 4.4 flat and a 4.42. This was last summer.
Okay.
At that.
So schematically, kind of talk about that
real quick. I just need to say this, Sean.
Yeah,
he's their slowest corner commit by far. He's their number 3 speed wise. He's their number 3 DB in his class because Peyton Bowens is running the 4.3s. I just needed to say that to talk about how this is
unfair, man. You put him with a couple of cheetahs.
But that's the point. That's what this staff is doing, where a kid running a 4.42 is your slow guy.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
right.
I mean, that's what they're putting together. And that's the thing to me. I just had to say that is, you talk about the class impact. You know, we didn't touch into this. We got into like numbers need and impact need. The one thing that I felt like they have upgraded the athleticism and speed on defense, but I still felt like there was definitely another level in speed that they needed to get to in the secondary. A guy here, a guy there, but the speed of the defense was a lot about what they had up front and at linebacker especially.
Yeah.
You know, but there was definitely a need for an increase in speed in the secondary. Yeah. And this class, especially in the secondary with Micah Bell, Peyton Bowen, Christian Gray, and even a Don Schuler, who is now the slow guy who moves pretty well. The speed upgrade that they're bringing in the secondary is exceptional. And that's something I think that is very, very important as well to discuss. So we can go on to your question next, Sean, but I meant to say that earlier, but that can't be dismissed. I mean, you're talking about a kid that's over 6 foot tall, that's been at multiple places timed in the low 4.4s.
Yeah.
That is one of your, of 4 guys as your 3rd fastest guy. I mean, that's a huge speed upgrade for Notre Dame.
And I think we have to give, I don't know if you guys didn't read the story after his visit in April, you have to give credit to the South Bend community on this one as well, because his family came in purposely the night before on his visit and went out on the town to meet the residents of South Bend, because it was important to know the people in the community that he might be committing to over the next 3 to 4 years. And they did that with a purpose and went out and ate and engaged with people in the community and talked to them and found out a lot within that 2 to 2.5 hours. So Brian, with guys like Charles Jagasaw and that family, and Christian Gray and his family, as you said, it's easy to see why they ended up committing to Notre Dame. But for us to have these type of guys that we get a chance to follow, what I'm about to say, is quite refreshing. It's something that reinvigorates us, actually, to say, you know what? All right, let's get on to the next kid, because sometimes in recruiting, everything can become redundant, to a certain point, whether it's what you're hearing from kids, how they respond, and, body language of kids. From a video I sent you earlier today, just to get your thoughts on the body language isn't right. And a kid like Christian Gray, every time I spoke with him or just text with him, there was nothing but great vibes.
Right.
Regardless of what we were talking about, the vibes and the body language was always there.
He always had good things to say about Notre Dame, Sean, but there was an interesting comment that he made to you back in April when Notre Dame started, because I'm glad you brought that April visit up, because that's when Notre Dame started to take that turn, where they were falling behind and they started to take that turn, because at that point in time, LSU and Ohio State had all the momentum.
They did.
And he made that comment to you, and I believe I'm saying this pretty spot on to what you said, but he said Notre Dame is starting to make a move.
Yeah.
I believe that's what he said to you.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
the interesting thing is, and whenever you'd talk to him, we'd talk and you'd share with me what he said. His thoughts on Notre Dame never changed.
No.
Like there was no like lack of communication. There was no lack of love. There was no lack of attention. There wasn't any reason they fell behind other than those teams just had momentum because of the new hires. And it was new. It was the shiny new toy, right? And then, of course, that relationship with Coach Steeples, which, again, I can't stress enough how big it is to get that because, look, we like to take shots at Brian Kelly, right? Rightfully so. He's earned those shots. But in this instance, I don't think LSU did anything wrong.
No.
I mean, LSU recruited him hard. They put in all the effort. It's just that's what Notre Dame was able to do, and they were able to stay with it. And, and somebody asked a question, Sean, and it was from Adam Ziliak. He said, Brian, do you think it worked better for Notre Dame that he did wait to commit? And honestly, Sean, I think it is. And what I mean is I think it worked out well for them that he didn't commit back in January. Because remember, we had talked like there was a lot of rumblings that he was going to commit back then. I think there might have been some like crystal balls or whatever those things, that for the other good sites are about him picking Notre Dame. And, I wonder if Coach Steeples and some of these other, Coach Walton from Ohio State, who both did a great job with Christian in this recruitment, like because when a kid decommits, it can be hard to get him back into class.
Yeah. Yeah.
You lose. I mean, you just like, who wants to decommit and go back? It worked out well with like Deion Colsey, but it just doesn't happen very often. And so you look and say, boy, it is good that he waited. And again, I think now he's much more certain of his decision than he would have been back in July, where there would have been those what ifs. Because let's say he would have not decommitted or not gone somewhere else. Let's say and he stays in the class. Would he have had those doubts in the back of his mind? Like, gee, I wonder what it would have been like playing for Coach Steeples. Or gee, I wish I would have taken this visit or that visit. So I really think it worked out well for Notre Dame the way that the process went down as well, because, Christian was able to really thoroughly go through this entire aspect of this recruitment and say the good of Notre Dame, maybe some of the drawbacks of Notre Dame. You got to, saw Notre Dame fall behind. You kind of saw the fresh shiny toy at LSU and Ohio State and all the glitz and the glamour that those programs are all about. Yeah. And at the end of the day, Christian there was more important things to him, and that's ultimately what won it at the end of the day for Notre Dame. There's no question about it.
Very interesting recruitment from start to finish. And I agree. When you initially said that he was probably the most impressive recruiting job done thus far by the staff, it's like, my mind didn't even go there, after spending time with him and following him. But now that you mention it, like, you're right, because it took patience. You mentioned that his thoughts about Notre Dame didn't change. And I mentioned also that it was the recommendation of his former high school coach to be patient, give more time, and give programs a chance to come in.
Sean, was that Coach Steeples? Was that Coach Reed?
Oh, it was Coach Reed.
Coach Reed, okay.
It was Coach Reed. And it was at that time that everything had already happened. Bowl season had taken place, and all of a sudden here comes the January opens period. And here comes Coach Peoples. Here comes LSU. Ohio State had always been there, as I said before, the relationship that he had with that coaching staff. And that's really where his name started to hit the radar. So there was a special connection there. And then here comes Lincoln Riley and his staff coming in. And he said, jokingly, he said, man, the most fun I had on a visit was definitely USC. And I said, you know what? For several reasons, I get it. Like, I get you enjoying USC, but I think he knew USC just wasn't the right fit for him.
Right.
And like you said, he had every reason to be able to pull the hat at least of 3 of the 4 schools that he had in front of him. But ultimately, it came down to the collaborative effort, the vibe, the feeling. We haven't even talked about the relationship he has with Peyton Bowen.
Talk about that, because the interesting thing about that is, Sean, is that never faded. Even when Notre Dame was 3rd, let's be honest, that was still the same. It was it was such an interesting recruitment in that regard, because It's like this kid says all the right things about Notre Dame. He's got this great relationship with Notre Dame commits, yet right now it seems like LSU and Ohio State have all the momentum. Talk about that relationship between Christian and it was the Bowens, Drake and Peyton Bowen. He had a great relationship with both of them.
Yeah, of course, like kids these days, they built a relationship, and then that relationship extended to video games, and whether it was Madden, whether it was War Games, and Drake Bowen takes a beating because he says Peyton and Christian pretty much beat him at everything. But just that bond of staying connected, and you see it. The June visit, he comes in. The same day he comes in, Drake Bowen has a state championship game.
Mm-hmm.
I want to once again a state championship game. And as soon as he gets off the field, he hightails it to Notre Dame to have dinner with this guy Christian Gray before he leaves on Sunday. Like that just speaks to the bond, the brotherhood, and how important it was for them to be able to break bread together and spend some time together before the end of Christian's visit. And like you said, according to what you had been told, Christian pretty much came in. This is what I find very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And Christian comes in, and pretty much that Friday is like, you know what? Because as great as his LSU visit was, and I can concur or pretty much confirm how great that weekend was, because that was the same weekend that Carnell Tate was at LSU. The exact same weekend. And on that exact same weekend, they had Jefferson, Chase, Joe Burrow, and pretty much every player from that national championship team on campus. Carnell has spoken to me about how impressive and lit the weekend was, being around those guys. So for him to be there with his mentor and to have the impact of some of the greatest wide receivers and defensive backs, Tyrann Mathieu was there. He took a picture with Tyrann Mathieu. To go through all of that, leave it just 5 days before, step on Notre Dame's campus, and that Friday say, I'm committing to Notre Dame. That says a lot.
Mm-hmm.
For a lot of kids, that would have made a world of difference.
Yeah. Because that was the concern, right? Like that was the weekend LSU was going to be able to get back into that. Because you had said, for people that are on the message board, Sean had kind of put this on the message board that Notre Dame was trending really hard back in a positive direction with Christian Gray. But the conversation was always about, but you've got that LSU visit coming up. Yeah. Let's see how that goes. And so Notre Dame was able to not only weather that storm, but as you said, like less than a week later, he's given Notre Dame a solid commitment.
Yeah.
And I think that was a big, big part of this, Sean. So let's talk next, Sean, about kind of what's next a little bit. And when this is one of the things that we do, Josiah Wagner visited the last recruiting weekend for Notre Dame, which is the weekend of the 17th, and Notre Dame liked him. Yeah. There was nothing happened there. Nothing bad happened there. They liked Josiah Wagner for a time. I think they really wanted to take a third corner. They have since decided to just go with two. So when it comes to what's next, I think that what that tells me is a couple things. Number one, there's a lot of confidence in the kids already on the roster.
Yeah.
That we can stick at two. If you're looking at meaning if you're looking at it from the Notre Dame coach's standpoint, we can stick at two because we like the guys on the roster. I think that's what it's telling them, and that they want to use that for other positions and also next year. And then because it tells me they're confident in the talent that they're putting together, because now we can space it out a little bit is the way that I think they're looking at this aspect of it. And so I think when you talk about what's next, they're done. So it is July 4th. And Notre Dame is done with cornerback recruiting in the 2023 class, which means Mike Mickens can now push all his attention from a recruiting standpoint. Obviously, you got to work to keep these kids in the class, but he can start putting all his attention on this recruiting class on 2024. And that is that's kind of something to get you, I think, a little bit fired up at this point in time, Sean, is that I think the fact that he got Jaden Mickey and Benjamin Morrison kind of early last year, I think Benjamin committed in July, right? So I think that also helped them get Christian Gray, because they were able you're muted, Sean. They were able to spend the next year getting him. So when LSU and Ohio State made their move, there was that relationship to rely on and lean back on that was able to kind of win the day. But it's because it started so heavily last summer when they got Mickey and Morrison, and they were able to then shift their attention to the 2023 class.
Look, we've been saying this, Brian, and I'm sorry, man. I literally, CG just called me. That's why I went to mute. And Christian Gray was supposed to join us immediately after his decision around 420, and he got sidetracked. He called to apologize. It's because that's just the type of kid he is. And he asked, is there another time he can come on? So Brian, make sure that you guys know. You'll get the notification bell when we get Christian Gray on to talk about his recruitment. But that's just the type of kid he is. He didn't have to call back, but he remembered. Said, man, my fault. We're headed somewhere else. Can I do it at another time? And of course, I was like, you're darn right we can. Enjoy your day. It's about you. Like, we would have loved to have you on, but hey, we'll get at you another time. But Brian, I'm ecstatic, man. I'm ecstatic. This has been, once again, vindication for Mike Mickens. You talked about Josiah Wagner. You talked about the possibilities. And I'm just like you. When Josiah Wagner released his top 4, was it this week? I saw that Notre Dame wasn't in it. As a Notre Dame fan, you want to make everyone's final list. But then I thought about it. I said, you know what? And I don't want to sound disrespectful, and I hope that I'm not. It's almost like, oh, we don't need him. We don't need to be greedy because we don't need him. And for them to go after him, this goes to a coaching staff being honest. You go or get into a situation, and we know this with certain other positions in the 23 class. You get to a situation where you can have a kid, but it will be kind of gluttonous to make that hard push for that kid when you just really don't need it. Yeah, you know where I'm going with this. It's like,
I do.
It's like because you take the chance of putting that kid in a bad situation or a less than situation that's probably out there for him. So, that's another reason why I love this coaching staff. The honesty, being transparent, being patient, and at the same time knowing and having the vision and going after it. And like you said, now Emilio Agard, Jalen Mbakwe, Caleb Beasley, like those are just 3 of the top 100 defensive
Eli
backs.
Bowen,
Eli Bowen. That's another one.
Sean, you missed the memo. I have stated a new rule that when you start talking about 2024 recruits, you have to, you're contractually obligated to mention Caleb Beasley first.
Okay. I have no problem with that.
So, but that's the thing. It's a loaded 2024 class. And I think that's where the staff is coming from, Sean, is like, look, do we take a 2 this year or 3 this year? Right. And so then you land 8 in a 3-year period, or do you say, okay, let's maybe look at taking 2 to maybe 3 next year when you look at how impressive that board is. And also then you can use that scholarship for maybe a 5th defensive lineman or a 3rd safety or where you can kind of, or maybe a kicker, you know what I mean? Like there's a lot of other things that you can use it for. And I think that was something that they had made the decision to do that. And it, like I said, it now allows them to focus their attention on the 2024 class. And really, because to me, I've said this before, my dream class is Caleb Beasley, one of the other group that we've talked about, Jalen Mbakwe. I mean, there's a long list of guys. It's Mbakwe, it's Emilio Agard, all those kind of kids. Give me one of those kids, and then my number 3 is Eli Bowen. Give me those 3 guys in next year's class, and I'm just saying this is absurd. This is absurd what they'd be doing at that point in time. Because I'll say this, I think that I have 2 strong feelings about cornerback play at Notre Dame. Number 1, I think it's been given a bad rap at times, and it shouldn't. It hasn't been as bad as some people make it out to be, but
No.
it has definitely not been to the level it needs to be a group that you're relying on to win a championship. So those things can both be true. Like, wow, you're being a little too hard on it. It hasn't been bad. I mean, Nick McLeod was an all-conference cornerback. Cam Hart was very good last year. Clarence Lewis has had some tough spots and some big games, but he's also had some quality games.
Yeah.
You know, Tariq Bracy had a pretty good year last year. In 2018, Notre Dame had, you know, one of the best 3 or 4 corner tandems in the country. Troy Pride was very good in 2019, and Tariq Bracy was pretty good at times in 2019. Yeah. So cornerback play hasn't been bad at all. It just hasn't been to the level it needs to be.
Right.
And so we know that Mike Mickens can coach it up, right? He's shown that throughout he did it at Bowling Green, did it at Cincinnati. He's done it at Notre Dame so far. This is a position that did need to have its talent taken to another level, even though I do think people have been overly harsh on it in regards to making it bad.
Yeah.
It can be good, but not good enough. And good, but not good enough doesn't equal bad. So it's a semantic argument. What we can all come down to, however, Sean, is that the talent level needed to upgrade. And you have to do it consistently, because I would argue from a consistency standpoint, cornerback has been consistently underwhelming, and safety as well from a top to bottom depth. They've had a guy here. Julian Love and Troy Pride was a great tandem, but you know, Cam Hart, but then there's a drop off after Cam Hart. You know, Nick McLeod in 2020, but there was a drop off after Nick McLeod.
Right.
And now you're looking at it where you now have this third really strong class in a row, and I think they've gotten better each year, arguably as classes. I think last year's class I would still have ahead of this year's class if you look at what they were as seniors compared to what these group guys are as juniors, but I think the ceilings are just as high, if not higher, with this group because of that speed that Micah Bell brings to the table. But the fact that we're even having that conversation is just an example of the fact that they are restocking the depth chart. And that's the biggest thing is Notre Dame has to get in a position where this becomes the norm. I don't really care so much about landing 5 stars. It's nice.
Yeah.
But just give me guys who can play at a high level. And I think that's what we're seeing now is we're starting to see kids come to Notre Dame that can play this game at a high level. And we're doing it consistently because, look, some of these kids are not going to pan out. Somebody's going to get hurt. Somebody's not going to be as good as we expect. What has happened in the past is when it sucks, but that's part of football. What's happened in the past is the margin for error was so thin that if a kid, like if Julian Love gets knocked out of the Cotton Bowl, there's, you know, and then you've got an injured Dante Vaughn and nothing else.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what you got to turn to. The margin for error was always so thin that when a guy didn't pan out or a guy got hurt or something else happened, there was a big drop off. And I think that's what I love about this consistency of this recruiting is because you're widening the margin for error. And that is incredibly important in the game of football. Look at Bama this year. Bama this year in the postseason, you lost your corner. You lost 2 receivers. They didn't have, because they went from juniors and seniors to freshmen, and there wasn't that strength in the middle, they weren't able to just kind of plug them in maybe the way they have in the past because they've had some misses on the recruiting trail. And that's where Notre Dame is getting to, in my opinion, is the talent level, because you got a guy that can coach them up. You and I are staunch believers in that.
Yeah.
But now Mike Mickens has shown that, hey, I can go beat Clemson for Ryan Barnes. I can flip Philip Riley from USC. I can beat Washington for Chance Tucker. I can then beat Washington and Bama for Benjamin Morrison. I can beat West Coast schools for Jaden Mickey. I can beat Texas and Tennessee and schools like that for Micah Bell. And I can beat the 2 schools. Who are the 2 schools everybody argues about DBU? Who's the conversation between? LSU or Ohio State. You just went and beat both of them. And he was a take for both of them. Don't kid yourself.
Yes.
Right? There will be Ohio State trolls that'll go, oh, Ohio State. Yeah, he visited Ohio State the weekend of 24th. They wanted him. There's no question. And when they came out of that visit, it's not a surprise that the week after that visit is over and they know he's going to Notre Dame, that all of a sudden Ohio State takes 3 commitments from cornerbacks in that next week.
Yeah.
It's not a surprise.
Because those guys are pretty much waiting on him.
That's right.
Well, they were waiting on him because they thought they had a chance.
That's right. So you're now not getting sleepers. You're going toe-to-toe with the best of the best. You've now beaten Bama, Clemson. I'm trying to think here. LSU and Ohio State and Texas for corners in the last 3 classes.
Yeah.
That's where you need to be. That's where you need to be. And that's what Mike Mickens is showing. And this is sort of that icing on the cake of that really strong 3-year run that Notre Dame needed to go on. And now it's about continuing it. And that's going to be the key.
Brian, you make a great point, because that same Alabama program goes from, and it only really takes maybe like 1 or 2 misses and a few injuries to go from supreme depth that they experienced when they had 2 freshmen come in and connect in overtime to beat Georgia in the national championship game. Like Devontae Smith caught a winning touchdown as a freshman, and the next thing you know, he ends up a couple of years later as the Heisman Award winner. But that was the depth they had in that national championship game, that they could go that deep. Unfortunately, they get Jamison Williams and Mechie injured, and the young guys behind them could get the job done. So you're muted, bro.
They didn't have sophomores and juniors that they could turn to.
Yes.
That were part of that rotation, because they had some misses and they had some guys leave and all that.
Yeah.
And that's why retention is such an important thing too. But when you have those guys leave, that's why you need to have back-to-back strong classes, because that's how you're able to kind of keep this thing rolling, Sean. And that's what Notre Dame is able to do. I do want to, we're going to go to some questions here in a minute, but I do want to wrap this up with, I always like kind of doing this. So I'm going through the rankings here now, and Notre Dame obviously is back on top as the number 1 ranked recruiting class in the nation. And it's not just 1 or 2. They're now number 1 on the On3 consensus. They're now number 1 on the 247 and 247 consensus. They're now number 1 on Rivals, and they're kind of pulling away on Rivals now because of this. They actually pulled ahead yesterday with Rico Flores, and now they're pulled up even ahead. So it's really been fascinating to see this. Notre Dame is now more points ahead of Ohio State, who's number 2, than Ohio State is ahead of Texas, who's number 3. So the gap between 1 and 2 is deeper than the gap between 2 and 3. So Notre Dame is clearly rolling. Here's another fascinating point, Sean, and I wanted to pull this up just to make sure I was correct on this. So Notre Dame now has 19 players committed in this class. And last year, Notre Dame had the number 7 class in the country on the 247 Sports composite rankings. They were 7. That's a very good class.
Yeah.
Notre Dame right now has more points in the 247 Sports list than they did last year.
Wow.
Yeah. A very good class, a class that finished 7th nationally. A class, I mean, they have more points right now than Penn State had last year, who finished with the number 6 class in the country.
Yeah.
And Penn State signed 25 guys. I just wanted to ESPN, they're also number 1 on ESPN. We're joking, but yes, they're number 1 on ESPN. That was before they got Rico Flores, and ESPN updated their rankings yesterday morning before Rico committed. And Christian and Rico are both top 250 guys, or ESPN 300 guys. So Notre Dame was number 1 on ESPN before they landed 2 ESPN 300 guys.
300 guys.
So it just kind of puts into perspective just how good this class is right now. That this class right now, if it doesn't sign another dude, would finish 6th last year in the rankings. Just for the people to think, well, they're going to fall behind because they're not done. That's the thing. They're not done. So my prediction, Sean, before we dive into the questions, I predict that Notre Dame will land at least 2 more guys in the month of July. Yep. That's my prediction. They publicly. I think they'll publicly get at least 2 more in the month of July. So that is my my bold prediction, Sean.
We talked about this a month ago. We predicted 21 or 22 commits at the end of going into the season or going into fall camp.
19 right now. So Notre Dame now has the number 1 ranked class across the board in 23 and 2024. So yeah, it's fun. I kind of said this to you earlier today. I said, well, you picked the right time to jump on board and start covering recruiting in Notre Dame, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. And I appreciate you. I appreciate Irish Breakdown, IB Nation, and just the friendship and the opportunity.
Yes, absolutely.
Game
That
time,
last
yeah.
part's my favorite part.
Yeah.
So, Sean, let's get to some questions here. We'll finish this sucker off with a mailbag. If you guys have some questions about recruiting, about Christian Gray, about whatever you'd like to discuss, throw those in there. We do have some super stickers and super chats. John Bertucci, John, thank you very, very much for that super sticker. I appreciate you very, very much. Hey, Sean, D Troll Hunter is giving us some money for sparklers. With his super chat, the cost of sparklers these days. Appreciate you very, very, very much. Randy Hernandez with a super chat. Randy, thank you so much. The last 5 days have been awesome. Welcome, Mr. Gray. They really have, Sean. It's been a fun week. Yeah, and very fun. And they couldn't. I mean, but if this staff was truly elite, they would have had somebody come in on Saturday. I mean, you know what I mean? Like if they were really elite, they would have had.
How did they not fill up the appointment on Saturday?
They tried. Trust me, they tried. But prayers to all our Chicago Notre Dame fans. Definitely on that with what happened today at the parade today.
Yeah.
John Banco with a super chat. Welcome, Christian Gray. Thank you very much, John. Man, Sean, there's so many excited people. We had over 1,500 people in this chat at one point in time on July 4th on a holiday. That's how fired up people are about Christian Gray and recruiting. Christopher Morgan with a super chat. Christopher, thank you so much. OMG. What a great time for Notre Dame football fans, IB. What a great month of June and now July. Happy 4th of July to all multiple Notre Dame fans. Thank you to all the Notre Dame football staff. The next stake is on me. Okay. I appreciate that. Appreciate that very, 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 very much. And then, of course, K. Grant, the shirt makes a return because he's talking about this. This is definitely, Sean, a gap closing cornerback class. There is no question about that. On top of last year, there being a gap closing cornerback class. So 2 years in a row. Thomas Ellis, super sticker. Thomas, thank you very, very, very much. Here's an interesting one, Sean, as we kind of get into some questions involving these. Corey D asks, who has the best potential to be great, Bell or Gray? I'll let you start off with this one, Sean.
Whoa, man.
And there's another question that's related to this that we'll bring up here in a second related to that. But if you look at the two kids that they've signed this year, which one has the best potential to be great? So I think what that means, Sean, is who has the highest ceiling, essentially is how I take that, right? So they all reach their full potential.
The highest ceiling is definitely Micah Bell. Just ceiling. But greatness can be viewed certain different ways.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly think both of them could end up first-round picks at Notre Dame. Both of them. But Micah Bell has the potential to be like, I might as well say it, is the comp because, I mean, heck, they have the same coach. He has Sauce Gardner potential. He has Ahmad Sauce Gardner potential at the defensive back position. Like Velcro, speed. I think he's faster than this Sauce.
I mean, he's faster than just about anybody. Yeah. I mean, his track speed is insane.
But he has that ability. He's much more raw. And this is something that you can point to as well. Your point you made about getting away from field and boundary.
Mm-hmm.
Getting away from that gives you I'll give my opinion and then you can tap in. I think getting away from field and boundary gives you the opportunity to actually play guys more. And it went to what you said. Like if your second best guy is a boundary guy and it's the field guy that gets hurt and your boundary guy has the versatility to go over to field, so that your second best defensive back can move up and play.
Mm-hmm.
That type of versatility makes it a lot easier. And also going from what Marcus Freeman really loved to do with his defensive backs to what Al Golden is going to want to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's easier. I'll just be flat out honest. It's easier for Jaden Mickey to come in with confidence and do what Al Golden is asking him to do, rather than coming in and doing what he might have been asked to do if Al Golden wasn't here. And Benjamin Morrison just happened to be injured. He probably would have had similar success with the talent that he has.
Well, if he'd enrolled early,
yeah.
That's what you meant.
That's what I meant. But I think moving forward, we're going to see that continue to be a trend
Yeah.
for Notre Dame. And I can see Micah Bell. Christian Gray can walk in
Right.
and make an impact.
So you were getting ready to say what I was about to say, Sean. I think Christian Gray has the highest floor.
Yeah. Oh.
I think that Micah Bell has the highest ceiling. And what Sean's saying is regarding just so people, because sometimes people take things literally. What Sean's saying about Sauce Gardner is not that he's going to be the same kind of player as Sauce Gardner, because they're different body types and all that. It's more of just the ability to be that half the field is gone, right? Like, and the comp that Ryan has used in the past that I think makes a ton of sense is Denzel Ward for Micah Bell, because he's the one question on Mike is he's just not real long. He's not real tall. I mean, he's got good arm length. It's not like elite arm length, but man, he is instinctive, but he can freaking fly. And Christian's more like Sauce in regards to style of play.
Yeah.
Longer and that kind of thing. And so to your point, Sean, if they both reach their full potential, I think that they could both potentially be first-round picks. And I feel the same thing about Benjamin Morrison from last year. But it's more of like a Micah could be top 10 NFL pick if he reaches potential. It's just the thing is like to kind of make it seem, like that sounds like super homerish, but I mean, there's a long way to go for him to get from where he is now to that level. It's just more about if everything goes right, that's the kind of upside he has. It's not predicting they're all three going to be first-round picks. It's not what I'm predicting. We're just saying if everything goes to plan and every kid taps into what we believe his full potential to be, here's what I think he could be. And for me, ceiling-wise, it's Bell, Morrison, Gray, Mickey from a ceiling standpoint. From a floor standpoint, it's Mickey, Gray, Morrison, Bell.
Yeah.
So it almost flips on its head, the floor and the ceiling for me. But I think that's what's kind of exciting about it. That Jaden Mickey could potentially rank last in anything involving cornerback rankings. Says everything you need to know about how good cornerback recruiting has been at Notre Dame.
Don't let him find out.
Yes.
Competitive as he is, please don't let him find out.
He'll quickly find out where I live and be like, "You want to race? You want to do? You know what I mean? Like, like he'll want to do something. There's no doubt. That's one of the things I love about that kid as a football player. And then the other question we had was kind of along the lines of it. Will Chisanik said, "Brian, does Micah Bell have 5-star upside? And if not, why so?" Yeah, he does. He does for me. He earned a 5-star upside grade on my board because the reality is he's long enough and big enough to where his size isn't a weakness.
Right.
It's not a strength, but it's not a weakness. But his athleticism, because again, we focus on his speed, but it's not just about speed. It's you can be fast and not be a football player. He's athletic. And that's the thing about it is like the one thing that some people are most sold about with Christian Gray is probably the thing I most question, which is what's his playing speed like, right? As a corner.
Yeah.
Well, if that's the biggest question, that's one of the things Sean's most confident in, right? I mean, that's the thing is like we're nitpicking really good players here. And that's the thing that I'm excited about but you just can't teach that speed.
No.
And did you see the clip that I put out yesterday, Sean? The tweet that oh my gosh, that's insane. I want to play that for people because I saw that and I was like, you've got to be kidding me.
As you get that ready, you just brought up something, and I'm interested to hear what you have to say. When you have a guy like Christian Gray or Caleb Beasley, longer, you almost have to. You love to see 4-4, but with kids like that, what you want to see is transition and short area quickness.
Yes,
because it's far more important with their body. And as they continue to grow into their body, that's going to be the main thing that allows them to play much faster and at the speed you need them to. Because they're going to naturally have recovery speed because they're long.
Right.
And they're going to be able to chase down guys if they are indeed fast. So that won't be the problem. The problem is going to be quick area, bump and run, especially being able to play in the boundary. And then being at that size, you would love for them to be physical as well. And they both fit that bill. Christian Gray definitely fits that bill.
Well, and the thing about it too, Sean, is like you said, like a lot of kids who are long, they're fast vertically, but they don't like. Here's the thing: like you talk about the recovery speed, and that's great, that works, but that recovery speed doesn't really play as well when you're playing some of the more elite teams on the schedule, right?
Mhm.
It doesn't really play incredibly well when you're trying to cover the kids that Bama's throwing out there and Ohio State's throwing out there, because once you get beat, they're fast enough to where your recovery speed doesn't play because they're as fast as you are.
Right.
And so that's why when Sean talks about the transition, that's why that is so important, is because the transition is the thing that says, am I going to keep up with him or not? Or is this guy going to pull ahead of me? And to me, that's when you watch these kids play, that's the big part about this, Sean, is, you've got to be clean, you got to be smooth. And that's what helped Julian Love, is even though he wasn't a fast guy, he was a pretty twitchy guy. He could really open and change direction pretty well.
Yeah.
And the other thing too, that's important is, look, I loved Troy Pride as a player. Loved Troy, and he's a great kid. I mean, I'm sure you've got to meet him. I've had a chance to get to know him a little bit. He's a great kid. But the one knock that you always had, which can hurt a cornerback, is Troy just did not have good ball skills. And he didn't play the ball great in the air. He just would lock you down. Well, at times that can kind of get you in trouble. And to me, when I look at a kid like Micah Bell, that's the one thing I love, is he's a football player who also happens to be a track star.
Yeah.
And Christian Gray, I mean, again, I don't even see the 40 time show up for Christian Gray that people say is there. But he's such a smooth, natural football player that I don't get super concerned about it.
Yeah, he tweeted out the envelope on his Twitter page from the Ohio State with both times on it this week.
Right.
Yeah, so I think that's the same thing that you're saying.
Right. And that's the thing that you say that I'm excited about. I'm trying to find that tweet right now from Micah Bell. I think did I send it to you guys? Let me see if I can find it here real quick. Just give me a second, because I can't find it.
I think you retweeted it Friday, right?
Okay, yeah, but it's not showing. Oh, here we go. I found it. Here we go. I got it here. I want people to see this, because this is phenomenal. So here we go. So Micah Bell in this particular clip is number 11. So let's pull this up. This is just ridiculous. So Micah Bell is right here. He's number 11. He's initially going to be playing the jet sweep. Let's watch this. That is just stupid, Sean. That's just absolutely insane. Insane. Somebody's like, that's like the DK. No, DK Metcalf needed the entire field to catch that guy. Yeah. He needed half of it.
Yeah.
And again, it's a high school level, but you get where I'm coming from. But man, you can't teach that. And somebody was like, you got to be football. Look, I can teach technique, right? That's what these coaches get paid 6 figures for. You know what I mean? It's about, you got to bring the intangibles, and that kid brings the intangibles. And so that's what I'm excited about when I look at these different guys, Sean, it's exciting to be looking at that talent, because you can't teach that. You can't teach that. It's really nuts. It really is nuts.
It's like, is Micah Bell the type of, like you said, Matt Bayless can't wait to get Christian Gray in the locker room. And insert Micah Bell's like a sports car, so you have to be very, very gentle,
right,
with what you do to him.
Right.
So all right, let's sit down and come up with the plan, because we really don't have to do much from a speed standpoint. Let's put a little extra on his chest, maybe just a little bit. But this kid right here, he's ready to pull out.
Yep, no doubt.
Get him out the garage, get him solid, get his technique solid, and let him go. You know what has been solved as well this weekend?
What's that, Sean?
We won't be known as Fair Catch U for long.
No. That's a great point. That's a great point.
No.
Both of these kids are dynamic return men.
Yes.
Matter of fact, all 3 of the athletes in Notre Dame signed this or got committed from this weekend, including Rico Flores,
Yep.
have 90+ yard kick returns on their resumes.
Yep.
So yes, and I like Christian as more of a punt returner because he's got
Yeah.
that strength and that quickness. And you talk about getting Micah Bell back there as a kick returner with some of the linebackers and safeties and tight ends that are on the front, that are on the front line of kick return and the upbacks on kick return. There's going to be some creases for that cat to run through.
Absolutely.
And that's something that gets you pretty fired up. Pretty fired up. I love this response from Salty Virginia Peanuts. He goes, false choice. Bell and Gray both have greatness potential. So true.
I'm with that.
Yeah, true. So last question from Jordan Zgrabik. Hopefully I said that correctly, Jordan. Brian, is recruiting burnout a thing? Any chance Freeman works too hard and we see some negative effect? Not complaining, just curious. Yeah, it's a real thing. It's definitely a real thing.
Mhm.
I think that's where it comes down to, are you prioritizing time away? Are you prioritizing time with your family? Are you prioritizing time with your team, with your coaches? For example, I think it was like a day before they were getting ready to have a visit or something. I forget what was going on. And I see this tweet from Tommy Rees where the whole offensive staff is in Chicago at a Cubs game.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's great.
That was
Those kids aren't on campus yet.
That was days before the 12th of June, which was a huge weekend.
Yes. You need that. You need that time away. Because look, what are they going to do that night anyway? Except stress out. Just look, get away from it. Go do it. It's a 2-hour ride.
Yeah.
Right. Go do it. Have some fun. You've put in the work that day, and then come back ready to rock and roll. So it is a real thing. I think it's part of it too, is when you don't have a staff that puts in the same work you do. So, I think what can he do? I think number one, he has to have a staff that they can trust to delegate things to. He's got to make sure that he's making time to be a father, to be a husband, to spend time with his team and his coach and his players. That's really what it comes down to. But I will say this, and I'm not going to rant today, Sean, but the NCAA has to step up and do something about the current calendar. They've got to do something to where they're taking more time, where there's no recruiting contact, because the kids need it, but the coaches need it too. Yeah. And that's partly why you're seeing some coaches go to the NFL, because they're like, man, I just can't do this year round.
Deal with this, right?
I can't do it year round. And that's got to get adjusted. We'll see if it does or doesn't. I have no clue. I doubt it, but it needs to. There's no doubt, no question. So, Sean, to wrap up, Notre Dame, Christian Gray, it's official, right? This long, winding road, about his recruitment is now complete, and Notre Dame has landed Christian Gray. How you feel, Sean? Because I know this one for you is a little different. This one, the last couple really two of the last three were a little different for you.
This recruitment gives everyone in IB Nation just a sneak peek into our conversations, right? Mm-hmm. Because we'll talk about recruits, and Brian will be like, I don't know. Like, Sean, how you feeling? Oh, I feel good about Christian.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm hearing some things.
Yeah.
B. We're good.
Because you bought what I was told about. I don't care where we stand right now.
Right.
We may lose him initially, but
right.
And that's how you felt. Yeah. And you told us, like, look, Notre Dame doesn't feel great right now, and so feels good, and all, and you're like, just you gave it back to me. Sean gave it back to me. Let it play out.
Yes. Let it play out.
He turned it back on me.
Let it play out. And that wasn't from, I'm not psychic. Don't have those powers. But you just have to have the ability to listen to what people say, because if you listen long enough, they'll let you know what's important to them. And the more I learned from this young man and his family, what was important to them, I was like, oh, they're talking about Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care what the crystal ball say right now.
He may not know it.
He may not know it yet. But they're talking about the University of Notre Dame. And that's what stood out to me from this recruitment. And the lasting impression is that this young man, more so because of, and we can say this as well, sometimes as fan bases, we can, get intense when it comes to recruiting. These are some tough decisions for these young men. It's not as simple all the time as you may think.
Mhm.
Today, when you watch Christian Gray make a decision, that was a pull and tug on the heart decision. Pull and tug on the heart. You're talking about putting the family and everything that Notre Dame was to him in front of his mentor.
Mhm.
You know how tough that phone call down to Baton Rouge was for him? That was a tough phone call to say, Coach,
Mhm.
I think I'm going to go to Notre Dame.
Mhm.
You know, and I'm sure Coach Peoples, being the mentor he is, won't stop being a mentor
Yeah.
in his life just because he chose
Right.
to go to another school. But it's a very, very tough decision. And when you see these young men sit up there and pull a hat, don't take it lightly, because
Yeah.
it literally is one of the most important decisions of their lives.
But kind of what you said, Sean, isn't that what Marcus Freeman said he was going to do?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to find these kids that are Notre Dame kids that just don't know it yet, and
Yeah.
I'm going to find the best players and show them and convince them that they're Notre Dame kids, because a lot of them deep down are. And you know, that's what the new ball coach is doing, and that's why we're sitting here July 4th with Ohio State getting close to being filled up, and Georgia's got a bunch of kids, and Texas has a bunch of kids, and Notre Dame is clearly out ahead of all of them right now in recruiting rankings.
Yeah.
And is, you know, in the position where by the end of it, will they finish with number 1, number 2, number 3? I don't know, but I'm pretty confident right now at this point in time that they're going to finish with one of those 3.
Yeah.
As long as they continue. And when you land kids like this, it just makes it easier and easier and easier to do it with the next one.
Absolutely.
And that's a big part of it. It's a big part of it. So that's going to do it for today's show, everybody. I got some hot dogs I've made. So Sean, I made, so I got the grill out today. I hadn't used it in a while, so I had to clean it. You know, I had to do all that kind of stuff. I threw a couple steaks on there. So we actually, I actually do a thing with this company called Moink. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but they send like a monthly shipment. So I got some New York strip for myself, and I got a sirloin for Angela, because she doesn't like, for some reason, she doesn't like any fat on a steak, right?
Okay.
She just doesn't, she grosses her out. And so I even like to where she doesn't like me to cook it like that. You know what I mean? Like I was like, I'll cut it off. It adds flavor. Just doesn't want it, right?
Yeah.
So I made that, did some corn on the cob on the grill. And I actually did, I got one of those smoker, like those little bricks that you can put chips in to kind of smoke it with a little hickory flavor on it. So we did all that, but she wants to do hot dogs and baked beans tonight. So we're going to go, start a fire out in the backyard, and we're going to do some dogs. So I'm going to enjoy the rest of my Independence Day. No question about it. But I want to.
How did the sweet potatoes turn out, though, bro?
She loved it. So I don't like sweet potatoes, right? I made that for her. Okay. But it's this new recipe my mom gave me, and it's basically you can do it with potatoes too. And I've had them with potatoes, and they're like the best baked potatoes I've ever made. But you just put like a little bit of butter on the outside, you clean it, put a little butter on it, put it in a tin foil, and and put it in a crock pot, slow cook it for 4 or 5 hours. And it's just really soft and tasty, and just absolutely love it. But I don't do sweet potatoes, so I did that for her. Because Sean called me this morning and I didn't answer, and I called him back and I was like, "Hey man, I have butter all over my hands, so I couldn't." He's like, "What?" He's like, "It was like what, like 9:30 in the morning." He's like, "You hear this pause? Like, do I want to ask?
Why?
Do I want to ask why?"
Yeah,
I had butter all over my hands. What? So, no, I explained what it is, but no, we did that for that was with the steak. You know, what we had today with the steak, and then now tonight we're gonna do hot dogs and all that good stuff. We did get a couple super chats here at the end, Sean. So I want to bring those up here really quick. Appreciate Peter very much. Just a final thank you to guys for all the hard work you do. Great job, and go Irish. Peter, thank you very, very, very much for that. Look, we know all of y'all work hard for the money you have, and the fact that you choose to share some of it with us.
Yeah.
I hope that you understand how much we appreciate that. We really do. We really do. Charlie Weiss's last belt. Luke Bryan, if BK was still head coach, where would we be with recruiting?
Didn't we ask this question about this particular recruit?
This one, yeah. Because I asked Sean this. I said, would he be at Notre Dame if the previous administration was here? Part of me wants to say, my initial response was no. No, actually, the question was before Marcus arrived, because if Marcus and Mike Mickens were the D coordinator, corners coach, I still think they'd have got Christian Gray in the end.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what about before he arrived? I think the answer is no. I think they would have moved on. That's the thing, is that when they fall behind like that, they would, in the past, they would just move on to somebody else. Well, we liked so-and-so better anyway. No, you didn't. Where would they be? I think they'd be top 5 to 7 right now. Maybe top 4 to 5, because they'd have maybe even more commits. But it would be from Brooks Barr. It would be from some other guys that maybe they shouldn't have taken. The in-state kid was a good football player that just committed to LSU. Kid's a good football player. He's just not to the level the kids that they have in the class are. They'd have guys like that, and those guys would be pretty good. And, they'd probably still have Charles Jagasaw. If they would have recruited him, but if they would have recruited him, I think they probably would have had him.
Yeah.
But it would be like it wasn't past year, Sean, when they would be ranked in the top 3 to 4. It was, they're there now, but pretty much they've used up all their big bullets. They don't have any, more guys to turn to, and they're going to slowly, just steadily fall behind.
Yep.
That's not the case. You're number 1 right now, and everybody's like, well, so Ohio State's going to get this guy, and Texas. Yeah, Notre Dame has a shot to get Jason Moore and Samuel Mpemba and Jaden Alsbury and Jaden Greathouse and Ronan Hannafin. I mean, they're not done yet.
Yeah. Right.
And that's the exciting thing about this. So very excited about what the chance that they have to finish. And I don't want to turn this into a BK bashing. They would have finished with a top 10 class if Brian Kelly was still here and Marcus Freeman was still his defensive coordinator.
Yeah.
Because the defensive class wouldn't look a whole lot different than it does right now, if we're being honest. I don't know if the D-line class would have been quite as good if Al Washington doesn't come along, but the rest of the defensive staff would have been just what it was last year when they signed a great defensive class, right? So the defensive class would be similar. I think the offensive class would probably be a little bit behind. They would have offered some receivers that you and I could kind of go talk about. And I don't want to throw their names out to make it seem disrespectful to the kids, but there's Cedric Irvin would still be in the class.
Yeah.
There'd be some receivers on the board that are nice players, but just not gap closers, which is what they made a living doing. So
good players.
Yes.
I want to make sure
players that would allow them to keep doing what they're doing, going 10-2, going 11-1. Yeah.
You see a kid like Cedric Irvin lose a Notre Dame situation and gain a Stanford situation.
Yeah, so it was great for him.
That's great for him on and off the field.
Yes. Cedric Irvin's a good football player.
Yes.
It's just, is he a guy you're going to go beat Bama for? Beat Bama with, beat Clemson with, beat Ohio State with? That's the question.
Right.
And they're going to, that's why Notre Dame has gone, it had the success that they've had. It's just whether or not you're going to be able to take it to that next level. That's the question.
Yeah.
That's the question. Then the last one, Sean, here we got from Gregor. Actually, let me pull this one up here first. Let me this one from Cal. Cal, thank you very much for your super sticker, Cal. I appreciate that very much. Gregory Gilbert, you remember when Brian Kelly tried his Southern accent, and I kind of made fun of him, his little wannabe Savannah accent. So Gregory's asking me to get it, Sean. I don't know if I can perform on command like that, man. I don't know. I do declare. That's what Brian Kelly sounded like. He sounded like, hey, man, I don't know if you know this, but Cajuns don't sound like they're from Savannah, Georgia. You gave them that family, like you're watching some Gone with the Wind stuff from Savannah, Georgia or something like that, or you know what I mean? But that guy, unbelievable. So, yes, I hope that it was worth it, Gregory. I gave you the I do declare for you there, buddy. I'm not sure if it was as good as the original time, because when you do it, when you're being funny, you don't think about it. You just do a little bit more naturally. So I don't know if it was worth it for you. It's like, man, I wish I could get my super chat back. That wasn't as good as it was the last time. So anyway, that's going to do it, everybody. Have just really enjoy the rest of your Independence Day. We appreciate y'all. We'll be back tomorrow, our same time at 1:00. And then, of course, we'll have IB Nation Sports Talk tomorrow night as well. So you can catch us there tomorrow at 1:00. And, of course, check out the message board. You can sign up at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Hey, the other thing, too, is if you are a Built Bar subscriber, we have a link to the chat below. You can always get 10% off your entire purchase, always. But if you need a refill, do it today because we actually get a little bit extra commission today. So that's another way you can help us out is if you're going to order some Built Bars anyway, or you've always wanted to but never have done it, do it today. and use the link below and use the promo code Irish Breakdown, all one word, no space. You'll get 10% off your entire purchase. You'll absolutely love it. And then you'll help us continue to support us. So thank you all so much for that. Have a great rest of your Independence Day. And we'll talk to you again very, very soon on the Irish Breakdown podcast.